Tonight on Talking Points, a $250 million budget. Syracuse Mayor Ben Walsh delivering his proposed 2020 financial plan, and interest rates are going up. What this means for city spending.
And later, sanctuary city standoff. President Trump threatening to release undocumented migrants into sanctuary cities to punish his political foes. Find out how this could impact Onondaga County.
But first, lock him up. WikiLeaks co-founder Julian Assange arrested in Ecuador, and now the U.S. wants to sue him for one of the largest leaks of classified info in history. All that and more tonight on Talking Points. Welcome to Talking Points. I'm Gilat Melamed. Julian Assange is set to face an epic legal and political battle following his arrest on Thursday.
And I'm Shama. The WikiLeaks co-founder has spent nearly 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy before being arrested by British authorities on behalf of the United States and brought to a maximum security prison where he currently remains. Ecuador's president says Assange's actions made it impossible to maintain asylum.
The discourteous and aggressive behavior of Mr. Julian Assange, the hostile and threatening declarations of his allied organization against Ecuador, and especially the transgression of international treaties, have led the situation to a point where the asylum of Mr. Assange is unsustainable and no longer viable.
Assange faces U.S. charges of conspiring to break into a Pentagon computer and could be extradited to the U.S. for prosecution. Assange's lawyer claims the charges affect journalists around the world.
About these charges, that the factual allegations are in effect providing a source assistance in protecting their own identity. Okay. Now that, as a factual matter, is absolutely a news gathering question and absolutely a free speech question.
Let me ask.
We're now joined by Talking Points analyst Gabrielle Caracciolo. Now, Assange has been living in the Ecuadorian embassy for 2,487 days. Why now?
Right, so as we kind of heard the Ecuadorian president allude to, he was saying that he just was making this terms of living in asylum uninhabitable. They claim that he was trying to make this a center for spying in that small room that he was occupying for that time. He hadn't gone out into the city of London for fear of being arrested. And the Ecuadorian president says he was assured that he wouldn't be given the death penalty and he wouldn't be extradited anywhere where he could receive the death penalty. And that's why he said, okay, now's the time.
Now, Gabrielle, Assange, a very key figure in U.S. politics. How's the reaction been here?
Yeah, so this is one of those few issues where people across both sides of the aisle can kind of agree they feel that he needs to be prosecuted. Both Hillary Clinton and Vice President Mike Pence saying the same exact thing. President Trump's reaction has been interesting. He said in the Oval Office, I don't really know anything about WikiLeaks, which is kind of confusing because during the campaign trail he talked about how great WikiLeaks was the whole time. So it'll be interesting to follow what President Trump says in the coming days and how he actually does react to this.
Now, also in the coming days, what can we expect next for Assange?
So he has 2 different video court appearances in the next kind of 6 weeks. It's going to be a really slow process. The outcome of Brexit can actually have an impact on this extradition process because that'll impact the different courts that he can appeal to.
Now, we heard from Assange's attorney earlier, but what's been his kind of defense against these charges?
He's saying that he was a journalist and this was in the public interest, and that's why that he shouldn't be prosecuted. Another angle that they can take is that one of the charges is saying he created this new account in order to access information, but they're saying that, oh no, he was just trying to protect Chelsea Manning, who he coordinated with. He was trying to protect her identity, and that's why he was doing that, and the protection of sources. So it all comes back to this argument that he's a journalist and this was in the public interest.
And speaking of Chelsea Manning, the two are having very different outcomes here.
Yeah, so Chelsea Manning was sentenced to 35 years in prison, and then Barack Obama commuted that sentence to only 7 years. That certainly is not expected to be the case for Julian Assange.
All right, Gabrielle, thank you. And under Mayor Ben Walsh's new proposed budget, Syracuse City residents could see an increase in both taxes and water rates in 2020. The proposed changes are an attempt to balance the budget as Syracuse continues to run a deficit and eat into the city's rainy day fund. Here to break down the budget is Talking Points analyst Anthony Dabbundo. So, Anthony, we're going to start. What are Walsh's initiatives?
Yeah, so
coming with this tax plan and this new budget are an additional few measures to try to spend more money. So they have a new system. They're hiring 5 people to bring in and fill potholes in Syracuse. It's been an initiative for the last couple of years. They're adding to that. They're hiring new police workers and new fire department people. They're also expanding their sidewalk snow removal plan, and they are funding the police body camera initiative that was brought into place in October. So they have all these new plans, but with that comes some more money required to pay for them.
Yeah, money required to pay is a nice term for tax hikes. So why the tax hikes here and water rate increases?
Right, so Syracuse has been running a deficit for years, and there's been a lot of people concerned that they would even go into fiscal bankruptcy if they didn't figure out some way to close that gap. They were running out of money in what's called their rainy day fund, which is kind of the excess money they had left over, and eventually that's going to run out. So this year they're projected to go about 8.1 into it, but they're increasing taxes 4% for the water rate and 3.5% for the tax increase, and that's to kind of make up for the lost revenue. Now, one thing to note, it's about $92 per household, that's per average household in Syracuse, and but if you add in the STAR refund check that a lot of people would get, they're no longer eligible for this, so they would actually lose about $220 in total per family. It's not a small amount, but not crazy significant as people would say. And so with this, basically, this is the budget deficit that's been projected for the last 3 years. It was $16 million in 2018. It was 11.1 this year. That's the projected total. The new budget, only 8.1, so they're getting closer to the new number.
All right. DeBunda, thank you. No
Thank you so much, Anthony. Moving ahead to some national news, President Trump's controversial ban on transgender military service goes into effect today. The Department of Defense says that nearly 15,000 troops stand to be affected by the ban and will no longer be able to receive their medical treatments. CitrusTV's Greg Bradbury joins us to break down how this ban happened and if it will stay permanent. Greg?
The Pentagon's controversial ban went into effect Friday and basically bans any openly transgender person from joining the military. Now, under the new policy, anyone diagnosed with gender dysphoria and receiving treatment for it through surgery or hormones will be barred from joining the military. However, anyone with a gender dysphoria diagnosis but not receiving treatment will be still eligible to sign up. The Department of Defense says that nearly 15,000 current troops, could be impacted by the new policy, and all transgender troops currently serving can stay in uniform, but the policy blocks all use of Department of Defense or Department of Homeland Security's resources to fund sexual reassignment surgical procedures. Now, this policy comes nearly 2 years after Trump called for a blanket ban on transgender service members, claiming the military, quote, can't handle the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgender in the military would entail. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the revised policy, banning any openly transgender person from enlisting. However, SCOTUS's ruling isn't the be-all, end-all on this policy. CBS is reporting that 4 separate lawsuits are working their way through the courts right now. Multiple LGBT rights groups are fighting the ban, such as Lambda Legal, Human Rights Campaign, and the ALCU. And some states are striking back against the ban, including right here in New York. Governor Andrew Cuomo is directing state agencies to provide all necessary services and resources to transgender service members who are displaced by the abhorrent federal policy. Back to you, Gilat.
Thanks, Greg. Next on Talking Points, ramping up the fight on Roe v. Wade. Ohio passes one of the strictest abortion laws in the country, sparking fierce backlash and teeing up a likely battle in the court. Stay with us, more after the break.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average four-legged homie, and then wham, bam, minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high five.
test you, try to break your will. But however loud the loudness gets, however many cheese puffs may fly, you're the driver, the one in control. Stand firm. Just wait. And move only when you hear the click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
Welcome back to Talking Points. President Trump is considering sending immigrants who enter the country illegally to sanctuary cities. The move would primarily affect Democrats who have opposed the president's immigration proposals. Now, Syracuse is a sanctuary city, and that decision may impact local residents. Here to discuss the recent developments is Talking Points analyst Thomas St. Hillaire. So, Thomas, let's start it off. How has the White House and Trump responded to this Washington Post report that just came out?
Right, well, we've seen very different responses over the last several days. I think on Saturday, you had White House and Homeland Security officials saying that this story really wasn't true. The president comes out hours later saying that it is true. Then the following day, you have spokespeople going on cable television saying, okay, the policy part of this is true, but the reason for it isn't true. They're saying that they weren't doing this as a revenge tactic, that they were doing this for other reasons.
Now, the majority of sanctuary cities are run by Democrats, so how has the party been responding?
They haven't been taking to this too kindly, it seems like. I think what you're seeing is you're seeing opposition on the political front, right? I think a spokesperson for Nancy Pelosi came out and said that they're essentially using human lives as a political pawn. But you're also seeing opposition on the legal end, really, saying that, does the president really have the right to do this? So, I think there was a story today that came out saying that, President Trump is doing this to kind of make a middle ground, but Democrats are not taking to this too kindly.
Now, bringing it back to Syracuse, Syracuse is a sanctuary city. How would this affect Onondaga County?
Right. I mean, again, anything's possible, but I think right now it's very unlikely that this would affect the city of Syracuse right now, in part because, according to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Syracuse really doesn't qualify as a sanctuary city because a sanctuary city is one in which they are defying orders by ICE. And right now what you're seeing in Syracuse is that they actually are complying with a lot of the orders by ICE at the moment. So while anything's possible, I mean, you have a Republican representative in John Kakko, and then they're also following the orders of ICE. So Syracuse doesn't seem likely to be a city that would be targeted.
Right, so you're saying Syracuse isn't likely, but take a place like New York City, Democratic Mayor Bill de Blasio, majority Democratic representatives in Congress for those districts. So are they more likely to take the people, would you say?
Right, I think that's exactly true. I mean, what we saw in the Washington Post report was that the main reason behind this was to target people who opposed him on the issue. So I think that's something, again, you look at cities like New York City, but also cities like San Francisco. Those are far more likely, if this were to be implemented, to be affected than, say, the city of Syracuse.
All right. San Francisco, Nancy Pelosi's home. Thomas, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Last week, Attorney General William Barr testified before Congress. The primary contention of Barr's testimony was whether or not unauthorized spying on President Trump's campaign had occurred. Barr said that he believes spying did take place on the campaign, but Barr did not specify what such spying might constitute. He did say that he will be conducting review on the intelligence activities directed at the Trump's campaign. Talking Points analyst Michael Furnari joins us now. So, Michael, spying on the campaign may have occurred. Can you tell us what that means?
So Attorney General Barr did kind of allude to this a little bit later in the testimony. Now, we're not exactly sure what he meant in kind of a concrete way, but it seems like he's talking about high-level spying in the upper levels of the FBI. Now, the Department of Justice did do a report on this kind of in the aftermath of the 2016 election, and they didn't find there was any impropriety. There isn't really a clear sign that he's going to be doing a concrete investigation on this, but right now it looks like he's kind of poking around the FBI to see if there was any impropriety there.
Now, Michael, that's a huge allegation. How have politicians on both sides of the aisle kind of reacted to this?
Well, first and foremost, we're going to take a little bit of a listen to what President Trump had to say at the end of last week on this matter.
Spying, unprecedented spying, and something that should never be allowed to happen in our country again.
All right. And
so now, shifting gears a little bit from the Trump administration back to the Obama administration, former Obama counsel Greg Craig was indicted last week. How does he fit into the broader picture?
So Greg Craig was actually counsel for both the Clinton and the Obama administrations, and he also actually, interestingly enough, was involved in the Elian Gonzalez legal battle back a couple of decades ago. So he is very clearly a very important member of kind of that Democratic Party establishment. Now, He, after he left the Obama administration, ended up working with one of the firms that was partnering with Paul Manafort in the Ukraine. So he found his way to the Ukraine after his time in the Obama administration, and that's where he seems to have been tied up a little bit. And right now he's being charged with misrepresenting his status as a foreign agent. So that is the latest casualty of the Mueller report, at least in terms of somebody being charged with a crime. One of the only Democrats to be charged, interestingly enough.
And funny enough, what does the future of the Mueller report look like? Will it be released?
Yes, it looks like William Barr recently announced that it's going to be coming out on Thursday. Now, the question is what's going to be redacted, what won't be. Right now, it looks like the redactions will mostly be classified information and also things that involve grand jury testimony. Other than that, it looks like we'll be mostly seeing what there is to offer.
All right. Michael, thank you. And lawmakers in Ohio are the latest in line for limiting abortion access for women in their state. Talking Points analyst Sabrina Maggiore joins us now to discuss what makes this new law even stricter than what we've seen in the past and why it might even appear before the Supreme Court. Sabrina?
Ohio is the sixth state to pass a controversial heartbeat bill legislation banning abortion as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy. According to the ban, abortions are illegal after doctors detect a fetal heartbeat, before most women even know they're pregnant. Governor Mike DeWine signed the bill into law last Thursday. It's one of the toughest abortion restriction laws in the nation. Ohio's become a battleground in the fight over Roe v. Wade, following a wave of anti-abortion legislation across several states. Kentucky and Mississippi passed similar anti-abortion laws just weeks ago. Georgia expects to pass their own heartbeat bill by May 12th. Ohio is only the third state to pass a heartbeat bill this year, and it's expected to go into effect this summer. However, the bill is already facing serious legal challenges. The ACLU says that they plan to sue. A legal challenge from the ACLU could help keep the bill held up in court for some time, possibly delaying the ban. And that's not the end of it. This bill could end up in the Supreme Court. A local newspaper, The Plain Dealer, reports that Governor DeWine said he intends for this bill to challenge Roe v. Wade, saying, quote, "Taking this action really is a time-honored tradition. The constitutional tradition of making a good faith argument for modification, reversal of existing legal precedent. The United States Supreme Court will ultimately make a decision. State courts so far have struck down any heartbeat bill, but the High Court could take up the issue. Ohio's Court of Appeals is more conservative than most, and a challenge to the heartbeat bill could end up in front of the Supreme Court's 9 justices. Recent conservative additions to the court, Justices Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch, mean the fight over Roe v. Wade could be closer than ever before. Gilat and Elijah, back to you.
Thanks, Sabrina. And a ship without a sail after ousting 2 different autocrats in the span of 48 hours. The future of Sudan's government remains unclear. But they're not the only Middle Eastern country in turmoil. More after the break.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the Why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where the cats go on vacation? New York.
A Sudanese military coup has ousted Sudan's President Omar al-Bashir after 30 years in power. It began Thursday morning, and within 24 hours, a military committee had taken power and moved swiftly to make changes. CitrusTV analyst Brandon Ross is in studio to tell us how this went down and what the next steps are. Brandon, thanks for joining us. So starting with al-Bashir, what are the next steps for him?
So he was taken out of the position of power in Sudan. What was very interesting is that he was the only active president in the entire world with an active arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court. Now with him out of power, there could be some start to ICC proceedings, considering he no longer has that basis to get a cushion away from the court.
Now, the military council quickly assumed power in his absence. What did they promise to do? What are some of their initiatives?
Well, early on, the first steps they took, they suspended border crossings into the country for a 24-hour period. They suspended the Constitution. They are promising elections in a couple of years. They want the military to control the country for a little bit. But the political chair of that military committee, Lieutenant General Omar Zain al-Abidine, says this is really about bringing power back to the people and installing democracy.
We are the protectors of your demands, but through consensus among political forces, we will not impose anything on the people. Rest assured that the Military Council's main mission is to preserve for Sudan the climate and the conditions for a civilized and peaceful dialogue, so we can achieve the aspirations of the people.
And as for the people of Sudan, how have they been reacting?
Not well. When the military took power, there were immediate protests amongst the Sudanese civilian population. They're very concerned that this could really turn into a military dictatorship, similar to what we've seen somewhat in the recent past with North Africa.
All right, Brandon, thank you.
Thank you.
Judges at the International Criminal Court in the Netherlands denied a request this weekend to open a probe into American war crimes in Afghanistan. President Trump is hailing the decision as a major international victory, while human rights organizations are slamming the ruling, saying it undermines the court. Talking Points Analyst Tyler Lowell is here to explain what this means for the ICC's international standing moving forward. Tyler?
Thanks, Gilat. In 2017, the ICC's chief prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, submitted over 20,000 pages of information to the court, alleging that the Taliban, Afghan forces, and the United States were responsible for war crimes in Afghanistan. Bensouda also noted that there was, quote, a reasonable basis to believe that since May of 2003, members of the U.S. forces and the CIA have committed war crimes of torture and cruel treatment, outrages upon personal dignity, rape, and other forms of sexual violence pursuant to a policy the U.S. authorities approved. A panel of judges unanimously rejected Bensouda's request on Friday, saying that while the case would be within the court's jurisdiction and the crimes are of sufficient gravity, ultimately the current circumstances and the situation in Afghanistan make the prospects for a successful investigation and prosecution extremely limited. Because Bensouda has been unsuccessful in securing the cooperation of the named parties and a significant amount of time has passed since those alleged crimes took place, the ICC is ultimately choosing to use its resources on cases that it thinks it could win. Human rights group Amnesty International saying that the refusal is shocking. It's a shocking abandonment of victims and that it weakens the court's already questionable credibility. The United States has been a long-time critic of the ICC since its inception in 2002, arguing that it acts more like a political weapon rather than an arbiter of justice. Several countries, including the United States, Russia, China, and India, completely refuse to join. And several African countries say that the court is unfairly punitive toward Africa. Gilat and Elijah, back to you.
Thanks, Tyler. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu began negotiating a new governing coalition today. The right-wing Likud party leader won a fifth term in office last week. It was a close election night that lasted into the next day. And my co-host Gilat Melamed is here to explain how Netanyahu pulled off the close win and what we can expect from Israel's new government.
Thanks, Elijah. This unprecedented fifth term means Netanyahu is set to become the country's longest-serving prime minister sometime over the summer. His Likud party won 36 of Israel's 120 parliamentary seats. Just because Likud picked up 6 seats, though, this election, don't let that fool you. This race was so tight that former IDF chief and opposing candidate Benny Gantz actually claimed victory at one point during election night before conceding the race the next day. His center-left blue and white party won 35 seats, just 1 seat less than Netanyahu's party. And that's a record number of seats for a first-time party that's now the main opposition force. The weeks leading up to Election Day were met with escalating tensions between Gaza and Israel in the form of airstrikes. National security is the most important issue in Israeli politics. Also noteworthy, though, just 3 days before Election Day, Netanyahu said he plans to annex Israeli settlements in the West Bank if re-elected. Now Netanyahu will form his coalition with the smaller right-wing and ultra-Orthodox parties. With an expected coalition gain of 4 seats, will this stronger right-wing government move towards the West Bank, or is that just a last-minute campaign push by Netanyahu to rally his base and stay in power?
And Gilat, Netanyahu is still under investigation for corruption charges. What's the status of that?
Yeah, there's 3 charges. It's 2 breaches of trust and 1 bribery charge. So we're expecting the indictment hearings to be in the coming months. And he would be the first Israeli prime minister, sitting prime minister, to be indicted. And the question really is his coalition strong enough? Do these ultra-Orthodox parties back him enough where they're going to stand by him, or will there be, calls for him to step down?
Certainly an interesting development in the Middle East.
Yeah, thank you.
Up next on Talking Points, looking ahead to the Democrats' new deadline for Trump's tax returns, setting up a potential showdown as April 23rd looms closer, while Bernie Sanders is expected to release his taxes tonight. Stay with us.
Here we go. We're gonna go out there in the rain. We're gonna get wet. All right, here we go. Okay, quick. Oh yeah, yes. So much fun. Mwah. So wet.
Leaving hot coals improperly extinguished can cause a wildfire.
Hey guys, it's Smokey!
It looks as if Smokey is going to use the drown, stir, drown and feel technique. After the first drown, a good start. Next, another drink. And finally, a close feel.
Is it cool? Okay. Yeah.
Hey Smokey, catch! Oh, my bad, Smokey.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for information on how to provide even better care for the person who wants to care of you.
Welcome back to Talking Points. We're going to bring in Michael Furnari now. We're going to talk about the taxes. It's tax day and everyone is filing.
It is, and Bernie Sanders just released his a little while ago. Michael, tell us about that and the other 2020 candidates.
So releasing the taxes has been kind of an issue we've seen, at least after President Trump broke with that tradition back in 2016. Now, Bernie Sanders released his returns today, and it was kind of almost a running joke because Bernie Sanders is the socialist candidate, and he now has a new book out that's topping the Amazon bestsellers list. It was kind of a joke that he wasn't releasing the returns because people thought it was hypocritical on his part, but he has released them, and now I think it's a question, almost a point of pride for Democrats to release it because now they're showing that they're kind of different from Donald Trump and a little more transparent.
And speaking of Donald Trump, quickly, do you think Donald Trump will ever release his tax returns?
I think it seems unlikely at this point because I think the seal is broken on that one. I think if he didn't do it in 2016 and he still got elected the president, I think there's really little incentive for him to do it going forward.
Right, and it'll be interesting to see Pete Buttigieg, Cory Booker, some other high-profile Democratic candidates still waiting on their tax returns to be released.
Absolutely.
All right, Michael, thank you.
And that's all the time we have for Talking Points tonight. I'm Elijah Shama.
And I'm Gilat Melamed. Make sure to tune in next week for another episode of Talking Points. Follow us on Twitter @CitrusTV News for more content. Have a great night, Syracuse.